blackness. Keep it, keep on. Keep on.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mind Right Radio. I hope everyone is doing well and staying cool on this hot Saturday morning. I don't know what the temperature is in other parts of the world, but in San Diego, California, it's expected to be over 100 degrees. So I hope y'all are staying cool. So with me this morning, I have Special Topics host, Dr. Malik Muhammad, and we also have Miss LaKisha Lester. So this morning we'll be talking a little bit about teenage parenting and specifically dealing with Black teen moms and talking about some of the trials, the challenges, and the stigma associated with that. So Miss Lester comes to us and she has had a pretty full career in life, having had experience both in the Navy as well as working in the education system, and is on track to secure her professional license for counseling. So despite, some of the challenges she has experienced, she has been successful in having a long 24-year marriage. So we definitely want to tap into her experience, her thoughts, as we talk about today's topics. So welcome.
Thank you.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Well, Dr. Muhammad, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to have this conversation, mainly because as I'm also was a teen parent too, so I can speak to the male experience. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to this.
Right, and I guess I should have put that out there as well. I'm also a teen parent, so can also contribute to that conversation. And I was thinking about it. My mom was also a teen parent.
Wow.
She had my older sister at 15. And that was, quite some time ago. So, yeah. So let's jump right into it. So, Ms. Lester, we just want to hear a little bit about your sort of initial experiences as a teen parent. So maybe you can walk us through like that initial, like finding out you're pregnant, how did your family respond? Who did you tell? Tell us a little bit about it.
I just want to give a little background information to kind of speak to it. Growing up, my parents really just decided that they wouldn't follow the norm and live in neighborhoods where people genuinely, look like us. So I went to school with a bunch of friends and outside of my neighborhood. So when it was time for me to join high school, the schools that I went to no longer allowed me to attend school in those school districts. I had to go in the district that my family moved into, which was in Southeast San Diego. Okay, so I had to go to school in my neighborhood. So I went into high school not even having friends or things of that nature, but just really trying to find myself. And at that point in time, boys are getting interested in girls. And here I am, this young, naive person at the school. And I'm thinking boys want to befriend me, liking me. So of course, I'm gravitating to where the attention is, which is the boys trying to be my friend. So I thought. And so to speed it up, at a certain point in high school, I found out that I was pregnant because I was very sick one day. I just couldn't keep things on my stomach. So my mom took me to the hospital and they told her then, and I found out then that I was pregnant. Because of the stigma and the shame, I told really no one. I didn't even want family members to know. So when we had family functions, I wouldn't go around because I didn't want people to know that I was pregnant. My parents, they never really addressed it. I mean, we had a brief conversation. It was very brief, just like, how did this happen? What's going on? And that was pretty much it. No one wanted to know who, where, why, or even get into how any of this happened. So it pretty much was unspoken.
Mhm.
So I can imagine that that must have been really challenging to one, not have a school that was supportive and, adults that, were trusted and people that you saw every day, to be in a place to provide you support and to kind of, shun you and alienate you. So talk to me a little bit about that, how that lack of communication and willingness to have a conversation impacted you.
I felt alone. And I felt like I had to navigate this on my own. No one spoke to me about the process of pregnancy. No one asked me how I felt, how I was doing. It was just, okay, she's having a baby and this is what we're going to do. That's what the family did. They put on their pants and that's what happened. No one ever, it was never discussed. It's not a discussion. No one asked me how I felt, how I was feeling, how I was going to deal with this. And even after, I believe now when I think back that I had postpartum depression as well.
Mm.
And still no one, reaching out and helping. And I had very good medical insurance. My mom was working at the time, so I had really good medical insurance and a really, really good doctor. And it's still something that just wasn't discussed. So just alone.
So what was your mom or your dad or your parents' response when they found out? What was that first thing that they said to you?
Honestly, nothing. They were just like, okay, you're pregnant. Okay.
Let's go get something to eat.
Yeah, it was just like nothing happened. It was a normal day. You find out this is a day that, yeah, it's just normal for your teenage daughter to come home pregnant.
Do you think they should have had a different reaction, or were you hoping for a different reaction, or just looking back, do you wish you would have got a different reaction?
I just wish I would have got a different reaction.
Okay.
And it sounds like that at the time you found out that it wasn't even something that you were even aware that, hey, this was a possibility.
No.
Okay. So, just kind of thinking on my own personal experience, I was actually a freshman at UCLA. I think I was 18 at the time when I found out I was pregnant. And when I finally mustered up the courage to tell my mom, she initially in that moment didn't say anything, but then her first response and question was, "What about school?"
Mm.
And
so let me back you up, because I want to definitely get into Keisha's later on in life. But so I know UCLA is not a school you just walk into.
Correct.
There had to be some planning effort. So in high school, were you A student?
I did very well in high school. And the irony of, my situation in pregnancy was that I actually was a peer counselor for children having children with Miss Diane Moss in San Diego. So my counseling experience started very early on. And I had this thought and idea of, I was clear that I wasn't going to get pregnant in high school. Like I had that.
Okay. Gotcha.
But I didn't think past that of like, let's also include not college.
Right.
There's more, but
there's more.
But sometimes that's the challenge I think kids have in high school is so much is built around graduating high school.
Right.
That transition, that there's still more life coming for you. So I think that impacts all of us. But I just wanted to frame, you weren't just out in the world.
No.
You had plans, you had goals.
Yes.
And you had accomplished a major one by going to UCLA. So first I want to acknowledge that, but also just kind of speak to that this can happen to anyone. I want to just have that be very clear, because a lot of times the stigma is hoe on the street, got caught out there, parents must have not been watching you, blah, 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 blah. Right. And that's just not the case.
Right. So, my experience was different in that, that was her initial response. And to be honest, I don't think she spoke to anybody for a couple weeks as she just sort of processed it. My mom was a single mom. My dad although, you know, we had a relationship, he didn't live in the city, but I don't think she talked to anybody for a couple weeks. And it was kind of like, you know, bring her some movies over, bring her some popcorn. They're like, Mom still ain't talking, you know. But then when I assured her, like, hey, Mom, I got it, you know, I'm still on the same track as far as finishing school. You don't have to worry about that. That she began to settle a little bit and really kind of embrace, you know, the process. So, Dr. Muhammad, I know you mentioned that you two had a similar experience. Yeah. How did your parents respond?
So I just grew up just with my mom. My father's passed away when I was young. And my mom, I kind of got the poker face. Like, all right. And I'm still in high school, by the way. So I'm still in high school. So she was just like, all right, so what are you gonna do? I'm like, well, we don't know yet. Cause at that time, I mean, we didn't know what we were doing. What I found interesting is that years later, my older sister, she was away at college. She told me that when she came to visit, my mom told her, and my mom started punching my sister on the arm, like, why the hell did he do that? Like, so there was a reaction, but I didn't get it. You know what I mean? Yeah. I didn't get it. So and that's so interesting that, like, wow, like you did have some feelings about it. But sometimes I think the overwhelming thoughts behind it are just, I think for parents are just the grieving of what I think their goals were for, or their desires were for their child. Sure. And also too, by having a child, your parents know how big it is and what that looks like. And you just don't know till you have a child.
You don't.
And my friend LaKisha here, she can attest that I definitely was doing the 2:00 in the morning feedings and stuff like that. So I had that fun experience very, very early where you don't know if the sun is coming up or going down. You know what I mean? And you barely don't know how to take care of yourself. Like, what's that mean at 18, you know?
So before we go forward, I just want to back up a little bit because, you know, oftentimes when teens become, you know, pregnant and then they tell their family, in some families, a discussion of like, are you keeping this baby or not? And it doesn't sound like from the three of our experiences, like that was a conversation. So I just
no. And I mean, definitely respect to my mom, but there was a sense that you're on your own now. And maybe not even think announced, like she didn't pull any support from me or nothing like that. Yeah. But it definitely felt like I'm probably going to be navigating some of this on my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not a lack of love. I just think sometimes as a parent, what do you do?
Right.
You know, how do you embrace that? And it was so interesting is yesterday, and I hope she's listening because I don't want her to hear this, but my niece came to the house to do my wife's hair and stuff. And my wife was like, and my niece is like my daughter, like my daughter. She came to North Carolina to go to North Carolina A&T, and we just took her in. And she's now, she announced to us, well, my wife was like, well, she got something to tell you. And I'm like, well, what? And they were like, I was like, I'm going back to sleep. Leave me alone. They was like, no. So I come back in the room and they're like, she's like, I'm pregnant. Let me be clear. This will be her third child. God bless. And even then she still was like, this is hard.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't want to disappoint you all. And my position is you could never disappoint me. Like, babies are always a blessing in my book. That's just always, there's two things about babies. They're always a blessing and they're never convenient. Never. There's never a time you be like, oh, I'm doing it now. Right. I mean, because there's just so many doctor's appointments, and then after you have them, you got to actually feed them and change them. And so I'm just like, my position is always, and I think I'm kind of going to the perspective of what I wish I would have heard and what I really think I wanted. And Keisha, maybe you can speak to this, or Vangie, maybe you can speak to this. But I think I wanted the community to come hold me, even as a male father, you know what I mean? Because I have different expectations. Right. I'm supposed to provide.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm 18. Yeah. But provide, I can't provide for me. Like, so, you know, I wish the community, and fortunately there were people in the community that did come, but I just think that's what I would have wanted.
That's an important piece as far as like people outside of your family's reaction. Because I definitely experienced that because I was with a few people in the community growing up in Southeast San Diego. We're living in Emerald Hills at the time, who had made this path to go to college. So when
Gotcha.
everyone sort of found out, there was this assumption like, well, she ain't
Lost
gonna
another one.
it's like,
Lost another
yeah,
one. You're
it's a
you're
lot.
done.
Right.
And you know what? I was
Right.
so pissed off and irritated about that. I was like,
Mm.
bet.
Good.
I'm gonna show y'all.
Good. Good.
So that really propelled me. I mean, when you look at the things that I accomplished, so I was at UCLA. I had my son my sophomore year, 2 degrees, 4 years, and that was my absolutely now take that.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you feel about them apples?
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? It was a real like, oh, okay,
Right.
that's how y'all feeling, and that's what your thoughts are. Like it wasn't like I wasn't aware of what people's thoughts and feelings were, but I didn't internalize that. I didn't let that, disrupt my emotional well-being. I took that and ran.
Wow.
Now I recognize that that's not everybody's, experience. So talk to me, LaKisha, a little bit about, you mentioned kind of the community response and people didn't really want to talk about it, but how did that impact you?
It just made me really think about where I wanted to go, and pretty much like you said, okay, this is what it is. This is what the stereotype is.
Right.
If no one's going to address it or talk to me about it, then I'm going to make my way. And my way was definitely to finish high school, which I did. I took, I think, because it was my senior year. So I took off the first semester of my senior year. I came back and actually physically went into the school grounds the second semester of my senior year to make sure that I graduated and walked across that stage with my class. So that was one of my goals for sure. And then, of course, everyone thinks that you're going to be out here, you're going to be on welfare, you're not going to do anything with your life. And at that point, I decided, well, hey, my best friend's going to college. I don't know what all that's about, but I'm just going to follow suit. And that's what I'm going to do. And at that point, I propelled myself into, like you said, this is where I'm going and this is what I'm doing. And just because I have this child doesn't mean I'm limited to do anything else in my life. It's just I have an extra person with me.
So I want to speak to that going back to campus piece. I think that's a big piece that people don't understand, the challenge that comes with that. One, you're dealing with, oh my gosh, I'm now a parent. And then continuing those education goals. At the time that I had my son, I was actually here in San Diego and I was taking a class at San Diego City College to transfer back to UCLA. So I had him and finals were 2 days after I had him. So I had his father drop me off at the school. And when I tell you I was scooting through that campus,
no, that's right.
Walk, I mean, I'm slow motion, like, hey, I got to get to this final. I'm looking kind of crazy. And the teacher met me at the door. She said, Vangie, what are you doing? Hey, I got a final to take. Like, let me in. She was like, You're doing well in the class. You got an A, you pass, go home.
God is good.
Man,
God is good.
but when I tell you, I was like, oh, I'm going to school. I mean, and at that time,
yes.
And LaKisha, maybe you can speak to that. Desks aren't made for pregnant girls.
Good point. I didn't think about that.
No.
Bringing tables and
trying
to make me comfortable.
Yes.
Like, yeah, it was different. That you can't fit in the desk. So
because now they got chairs like that.
Right.
Back
with
away.
the
I didn't even think about that. We had to
slide in.
Exactly.
I didn't even think about that.
You can't slide in with that baby bump. It wasn't happening.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So okay, if we could just transition a little bit to the aspect of like parenting. Okay, so now you've had this child very young at age. You are growing and developing as and making your transition into young adulthood. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges and maybe some of the successes as far as parenting at that age.
Oh man, for me, parenting was a challenge because I had this child at home with my family, so everyone was the parent.
Right.
And everyone's values, morals, what behaviors are in this child now, that the whole family. So when you do transition and leave your home, it produced for me conflict. Because it's like, now I'm the disciplinarian. I'm the one you need to be listening to. So if I said, I moved out, I have this child with me, and I'm saying, I said, this is what you need to do. The village is now speaking to the child, and the child is speaking from the top of the mountain from the village.
Right.
Like, whoa, well,
Being held up by the village, yeah.
Let me call my uncle. I said, I'm the parent, but then realizing that everyone was the parent during that time. So it was a challenge for both of us.
Right.
And I always ask the question, yeah, it takes a village to raise a child, but what happens if the village is crazy? Like,
ooh.
See, the assumption is that because it's a village, we're gonna have majority sane people. I don't know about that. I have done, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, as a clinical psychologist, I've done a lot of home visits, and of course, working my way up through social work. I've been in some homes, and I ain't just talking about Black people. Be very clear. I've been in some homes where the whole village was insane, and sometimes it was the kid that was the one that was intact.
Right.
Sometimes it was the kid that was just like, I'm just trying to time myself out, like they get out of prison. Like, I just need to do 2 more years, I'm gone. You know what I mean? But and I say all that to ask Keisha, how does it impact you if your child was being parented in a negative way? You know what I mean? But you're still a parent. Like, how did or does that affect your relationship? Because your daughter's older now.
Yes.
So looking at that globally, so how does it
really did. Globally, when I look at it, the difference was when I had my son, I decided at that time, because a lot of people wanted to help, it made me refuse and not take in like extra help during that time. It made me really want to parent and do things on my own and just figure out my life and how I was going to do it. So then at that point, I'm raising them both. And there is a difference between my 2 children. There is.
What's the difference?
My daughter.
What's the difference?
Just, you can tell the blueprint is different. You can. My daughter has her own way, and she's followed her own way and done her own thing, how she wanted to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you definitely can tell that there's a different blueprint. My son is outspoken. I just tell him all the time when he's talking to me, listen, I don't have time for Malcolm X today. I just need you to do what you need to do. It's not a debate. Just do it, and his intuition and all these things are just cooking and bubbling. And then, it just makes us close. As to my daughter, I think she was just closer to my mom and a few other people in the family. But now that she's older and progressing more into her life and as a mother herself, which means I'm a grandmother, she is reverted back, and we're closer now.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like after you had your daughter that you were still in the house.
Yes.
And see, my situation was a little different in that I had my son in August, and then school was starting in August. So then I went back to school and went back to UCLA and was just trying to figure it out.
Was he with you? He with you? Gotcha.
Absolutely.
He was.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
So, for basically being at UCLA, going to school, I worked 2 jobs. One of the jobs I had on campus. So I was notorious for walking on campus with him in the front and my backpack in the back. Wow. And that's just what it was. He went black.
That's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what you do. It was like,
that's what you do.
Right. So when I got that degree, he actually walked across the stage with me at UCLA. Wow. I'm like, baby, we did this.
How was that received? How was that received by people in the audience?
Oh, it was a dry eye in the room. Wow. I did the African graduation and they played Aretha Franklin, Gifted in Black. And I got my baby suited and booted, and he I actually carried him across because he fell asleep. But yeah, I'm like, hey, we did this.
We
you know.
did this. We did this.
Right.
I think the parenting piece, one of the things that I experienced is that people underestimated my skill as a parent because of how young I looked. So
Okay, that's a good point.
my son actually had a pyloric stenosis, which is a stomach condition where, you know, the babies can't keep anything down. It's projectile vomiting, you low key like, okay, what is going on? So I went to the doctor back and forth, and people are like, oh, you know, no big
Answer,
deal,
it's,
no big
it's
deal.
normal. It'll settle something.
And I actually ended up at UCLA. I had to take care of some school business. He was really sick. I took him to the UCLA hospital, and, you know, they finally had figured out what was going on. But the mistake that they made is they came into his hospital room with a team full of students. So it's the doctor and it's 5 or 6 students. And the doctor went to start training and all the rest of it. So I said, time out. This will not be a training opportunity. What is the plan? And they looking at me kind of sideways. So I don't recommend that anybody do this, but I politely gathered my baby, unhooked him from everything, and I sped like nobody's business to San Diego Children's Hospital. He was admitted, and they did surgery immediately. So mind you, he's 2.5, 3 months old and needed surgery to correct the stomach issue. But I was like,
oh, wow.
We're not an experiment. I
Yeah.
understand y'all are training hospital.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't understand the urgency or where I am at as a parent. You know, I've kind of been dismissed, you know, several different times. And I mean, it was a lot, but I packed him up and prayed the whole time. We got here, he was admitted, surgery happened, and the rest is history. But, you know, just speaking on that, you know, as far as what young parents experience, just something as simple as like medical care. Like,
right.
How many times are people not received appropriately because people, you know, may think that you don't understand what you're talking about as a parent? And that also translates to the education system. You know, we talking about medical, but young parents then trying to, you know, parent and navigate the education system. People have some thoughts and feelings about, you know, whether or not what you're talking about is an issue or not as well.
No question. No, and just your awareness. I know my when I was teen father, I remember my son used to always have the kind of like the mucus around his eyes, and then we would have to clean it. And I was just like, oh, you know, that's just, you know, what babies have or whatever. And kind of find out he had an eye infection. You know what I mean? And it's little having a kind of an aware village could have helped address that too. But us just kind of figuring that out on our own, I think that my reluctance as a Black man to go to the doctor was already starting to impede him getting the care that he needed. Because until I got older, going to the doctor was like, I'll do that later. I'll do that later. I'll do that later. And so I could see how that was impacting me because I was afraid to go. Are they going to tell me I'm wrong? Are they going to tell me I'm making something up? Are they going to question me as a parent? Unfortunately, his mom was like, I'm taking him. But it's those little things you have to step on them because little babies are very susceptible to anything in the environment that you. And I think that's, again, where having a village is really critical. Because it was actually moving here, and when me and my wife got married, the guy who was on our last show, Dr. Edwards, he told me he came over, took our newborn son, let me be clear, newborn son, he picked him up. No, he was probably about 6 months at this point. He picked him up, started swinging him around. No, you're gonna break him. He said, no, I need you to see they're also adorable. They're okay, and you're gonna make mistakes. And we couldn't get this boy to sleep for nothing at night. This Black man, and it's important to me to say Black man because, again, I want to knock down some of the stigmas. This Black man sat down and he wrote out a schedule on when to feed him and what to feed him all day long. And we literally follow as soon as we started following that schedule, he started sleeping at night.
Wow.
Because as new parents, we just, as soon as they start crying, you just pop a bottle in their mouth. And what happens is they get dysregulated because they're sleeping, because what was happening, he was sleeping more in the day than he's up all night. And you got to know how to flip that. And that was part of the village, you know, but I didn't learn that until like my 30s. Like while I had a child, but I'm thinking the village really, really matters. It matters the whole way through. the whole
Sure.
way through.
Right.
So one of the things that is very real, and I also want to expand that when we say teen parents, I do believe that young adults, folks that are having kids, early in their 20s also fall into this category. But talk a little bit about how you are growing and maturing as a young adult while your child is developing, and how that process of your maturation then impacts, that relationship with your child.
So you're growing up yourself and your child is growing alongside of you. So you're just growing up together. You're learning and teaching them things and learning yourself, and it works itself out. At some point, it does work itself out. I mean, it sets you back sometimes because it's not easy at all, but it can be done.
Right.
How did you Keisha, how did you manage her when she came into when she got her first cycle and was coming to kind of into her teenage years, as far as did that get you more activated as far as like, okay, I'm gonna make sure she doesn't end up like I did, or like how do you kind of manage how do you kind of manage that?
You have those conversations. You make it a point to have those conversations. The conversation was never had with me.
Okay, so what's the conversation? What was the conversation?
About your menstruation, about having sex, about protecting yourself. And if you're my age and you go way back, what they would say is, don't get pregnant. What does that mean? What does that mean? How do you not get pregnant? It's just don't get pregnant.
Okay.
Not really understanding what really gets you pregnant.
Well, I think it's definitely important for parents to have some open dialogue with their kids about, relationships, intimacy, things of that nature. So one, kids are understanding, all that comes with it, all of the possible outcomes. And I think that, growing up in our era, as far as like, having open dialogue with parents, I mean, that wasn't really a thing.
No,
right.
Not a thing.
Right.
I was fortunate in that, my mom and, the folks that were part of, the village support had pretty open conversations with me. And granted, there were, being a teenager and going through being angry for no reason, it happens. I had some women in my life, my aunt, very close family friends that are absolutely like family, that were, kind of my go-to resource. And my mom, God bless her, was very adamant about it didn't make her feel any type of way that I wasn't speaking to her. She was like, I don't know who you're talking to, as long as you're talking to somebody. So she embraced, those relationships that I have, with those, very important, women in my life. So I think that's something for parents to really think about, especially parents of color. We have got to develop an ability for our kids to communicate. There was a situation recently that occurred, and my daughter, who was very, confident and sure of herself, said something to an adult, which was appropriate, and they felt some type of way about it. And like, well, she shouldn't speak to an adult like that. Time out. She didn't disrespect you. She asked you an appropriate question. And because it was coming out of a child's mouth, you felt some type of way. That's on you. And I'm like, I'm not going to chastise my daughter because she asked you a very appropriate question. And because it was kind of like, oh, whoa, I kind of now have to reflect and possibly defend why I said what I said, or why I did what I did. And that's the issue with adults. You have to give, kids a time and a space to be able to communicate, even if that communication is low-key calling you out.
Right.
Yes. And what they say, out of the mouth of babes comes the truth.
And all three of my kids are the same way. They have all had, you know, moments. And I remember a moment very vividly with my oldest child. So he's growing up, I'm growing up, I'm going to school. So mind you, my oldest child there for the beginning, when I acquired my first 2 degrees. So mind you, I now have 5 of them. So he's been on this ride of like,
Wow.
you know, the development of Dr. Vangie and the people, you know, who people see I am today. But I remember very vividly, he had to be about like 8 or 9. He had did something, I'm upset, I'm tripping. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, is this really necessary? Talk about somebody having to take a step back and like,
Right. Yeah.
let me think about that, you know? And I had to receive that, like, okay, you're right. You're right. You know, another case in point, I was all about getting my nails done and all that back in the day, and happened to go one time to get my nails done at Fan Mart. It was a drive-by shooting. Trying to get nails.
Yes.
And I came home and he was like, are the nails really that important? Get your things off, okay? Like, you right. Like, I'm tripping. You know, and
Right.
Yeah.
you know, as parents in general, and particularly as young parents, like you have to be in a place to receive that.
Yes.
Right. Yes, you do.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
foster that. You know, so
Absolutely.
those are really, you know, important things. And you know, when it comes to like discipline, when you're talking about young parents and they're going through their own trials and tribulations. I was reading an article this morning about Lauren Hill. And, you know, her daughter has been speaking out about, hey, like things wasn't real cool when my mom was parenting us, and talked a little bit about the discipline. And Lauren kind of spoke to like the difference of disciplining out of anger and disciplining because you're truly trying to, you know, discipline and change a behavior. You know, I think those are all very, you know, real, you know, things that parents should be really keeping in mind.
And I think that discipline I want to think that how we discipline our children has changed, but I'm not sure. And I'm not even sure that the changes, like, for example, timeout and different things like that, are effective for a lot of people's kids. Because what I continue to see is out of control kids. And I don't mean just Black kids, but they'll just in private practice and stuff like that. Of course, in private practice, I'm not whooping anyone's kid or anything like that, but I have seen that clear, concise directions to kids
Absolutely.
works. And
That's all you need.
across culture. And I did read, I'm showing something similar to what you read, Vangie, about Lauren Hill. What I liked is she didn't back down from it. She did say, I made some mistakes. She acknowledged, hey, maybe there were times I went or in the moments that I was using it, sometimes it was more out of anger than discipline. But another thing her daughter said was, I don't think my parents are bad either. Like because she came back, the daughter kind of, I want to say circle back, but she said, you all are kind of picking and choosing kind of what you're reading into my post. I'm not saying that my parents did it all bad. I'm just saying there were some moments that I'm looking back that maybe they went a little too far. My mom went a little too far, but in general, I'm good. You know what I'm saying? So, and I wonder about that as far as teenage parents too, without necessarily sometimes having their own emotional development. Are they more likely to go to corporal punishment, meaning using a belt or a hand or something? Because sometimes you just don't have it. And one of the things you said too, Keisha, that makes me wonder about some of the parenting styles. And I definitely know we're going to do a show on this, I think next week, but postpartum depression. Those kind of, I think postpartum depression, especially when it goes unmanaged, can launch a good mother into a bad parenthood. You know what I mean? And so, and then that just becomes how you parent. So there's a lot of moving parts to being a young mom also that I definitely see and respect. So Keisha, and I may have already asked it, but I want to ask it again to just kind of really get a clear answer on, during any part of your journey as a teenage mom, were there certain things you wish you would have heard, but didn't hear, or like we're told, you know, like encouragement or something? Like, were there moments you're like, dang, I wish I had somebody that got what I'm going through, and then but had a positive words for you?
Yes, definitely. Would have just, just someone to say, it's going to be okay. You're going to make
Okay.
it. This has
Okay.
happened before. Because I'm sure it's happened in our family, and it's just, this has happened before and we've gotten through it. Point me in a direction, show me that it's going to be okay. I just really, even though I grew up in a 2-parent household with a whole intact family, and it just never was discussed. No one ever said, you got this, or we've got this. It just never was spoken. It happened and we just kept it moving. And I just think just having a support, or anyone just coming and saying, baby, it's going to be all right. And let's be clear, all of my mom's sisters were at that hospital with me when I had my daughter. Wow. And it still was, and that the village did come together for that, but it was never a discussion. So just to hear you and Dr. Vangie say that, this or that happened, or you had this or you had that. I didn't have those things. That wasn't my experience. It wasn't spoken. I didn't have an adult that I confided in to talk to. A lot of my things that I did were on my own. I just had to pony up and get myself going wherever it was I needed to go.
And do you feel like that made you who you are? As far as doing things. So looking back on who you were as a teenage mom, just that insecurity, uncertainty to who you are now, what have you gained? What it kind of taken that road less traveled, if we use that term, what did it give you? What did you pick up along the way that you would like to give to any young Black girl that's listening right now, or woman?
It empowered me. It really did. It empowered me to take care of myself and to know that I could do anything that I put my mind to. And I wanted to be a good parent. And so it just shaped me the type of mother I wanted to be. So I didn't, I don't like corporal punishment. I didn't go to those things. I talked, I did things for my children that I wish people would have done for me.
Sure.
So
when I think about, as we're, kind of talking about that and kind of that support, I had, tons of support, but I was adamant about doing things myself. So, I lived in LA away from my family until I finished school, and then coming to terms with, hey, I need some help. And when I say I transitioned back to San Diego, I cried like nobody's business. I was upset. And I remember one time very distinctly where my aunt, the late Shirley Ann Williams, was very upset with me because I was struggling in LA, but I was determined to do it by myself. And she was like, why won't you say anything? Why won't you ask for help? And I'm like, I got it. I'm gonna figure it out. I got it. And there was some frustration about that. But then when I said, okay, I had to transition back to San Diego, I said, if I'm coming back to San Diego, I'm coming back with a plan. So therein lies, the additional, degrees and, me transitioning into the field of psychology and all of those things. But I was very clear that, I needed to have a plan. So while the support was there, and I mentioned that because you see teenagers and young adults who are young and parenting, in this day and age, don't necessarily take that approach of like, I appreciate the help, but I got this. You know what I'm saying? So I think that, and I do believe, growing up when we did, we just built different, we just are. So, having been, tapped as a matriarch in the family at a very young age, I do a lot to, support my family and loved ones. But just having that internal, like, I got it, is different.
Yeah.
So Keisha, what are you doing now? What are you doing? And can you take me through the educational lane as far as how did you get to where you are now professionally? And where are you going?
Out of high school, I was just determined to figure out what it was that I was going to do for myself. So I decided to go to community college and figure out where that would lead me. And actually, when I got into community college, I loved it. I love education. I realized I love education. So I just went through, got my associates. I said, well, if this happens here, well, I talked to a counselor and she said, well, you can transfer. Okay, great. So I went, signed up and got back then you could do the transfer plan. Like if you took this plan, you could guarantee transfer into whatever school you wanted to. So at that time I had picked San Diego State. So I moved on into San Diego State, got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And during that time, I really wanted to be a correctional officer. So what did I do? I signed up and went to the academy. And by that time I had gotten married and a few things had happened by then. And my husband was in the military. And when I started my initial day of that academy, it had dawned on me that I have children to raise. And if my husband was going to be in the military, deployed a lot of this time, and I'm away working 12-hour shifts as a correction officer or whatever is going on in my life, who's raising my children? And then it made me think about how my daughter grew up and how she was raised by the village and how our relationship was challenging when we moved out on our own. So at that point, I don't know, I just felt like I didn't try hard in the academy anymore. Because at that point, I wanted to be a mom. Because I thought about my childhood and how I grew up. And I thought about my daughter in the village. And that's not what I wanted for my children. So at that point, I backed out and I got like a job at Sears or wherever else I was working at the time, so that my work schedule would align with my children's school schedule so that I could always be at home. And then as I propelled on, my husband's career grew and grew. I decided at that point as well, I wanted stability for my children. So I never followed my husband in his military career. If it took him to another place, he was just there and I was home being the mom that I wanted my children to have. And the wife that my husband needed at the time. That's what I chose. That's what I wanted to do. It was my choice. That's what I wanted. And during that time, I said, hey, while he's in the military, if he makes this the career, why don't you just go take a class at a time and get you a degree in something? So at that time, I'm devastated. I have this degree in criminal justice, thinking, well, I just threw that away because I stopped the academy. Now what, and I'm just here doing this. What am I going to do now? And I said, no, it's okay. You're going to think of something. I wanted to be a marriage and family therapist, but I was too afraid to. I just felt like I didn't have what it took. After leaving the academy kind of devastated me a little bit, put in my mind that I couldn't do things or something to that nature. So I went for a master's degree in health and human services, and I got that degree. And then it got closer to my husband getting ready to retire. And at that time I said, what else am I going to do with myself? My husband's going to retire. What career am I going to pick for myself? And that's when I spoke to my good friend, Dr. Muhammad here. And he said, hey, look, there's this online school right here. This is exactly what you want. It's for you. I think you should look at it. And I hit the ground running. From that point forward, I've been working on my MFT degree and my hours ever since then. And now that my husband is retired, I'm very close to finishing those hours and being licensed as a marriage and family therapist while being a mom, an awesome mom, so my children say.
God bless.
The other day, my daughter told me, she said, I would marry you.
Wow.
So being the mom that I want to be, being the wife that I wanted to be, and now being the person that I want to be, it has all come together from way back then of being a teenage parent, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. Not at all. I wouldn't change it.
I just want to ask one more question, if I can, Vangie.
Go ahead.
Can you do me a favor, Ms. Lester? Mrs. Lester, tell me how faith played a role in your life.
Oh yes, my faith is very strong. That's the only thing I had, and I followed it. Because if I didn't, I'd probably be somewhere else right now. And I had very close friends. That very close. I knew way back in middle school that were really close to me. And you know what? Along the way, our paths, they weren't the same paths. Right. And holding on to my faith and following the direction that I needed to go in. And sometimes
Mm.
everyone's not going to be on the path that you're on. And I lost very good, close friends, people I
Mm.
consider to be sisters.
Mm.
Well, you know what they say, if you can't grow with me, you can't go with me.
Go with me. So
Hey, I believe that wholeheartedly. If you ain't growing as a person, you can't go with me.
goodbye.
That's it.
Yeah. And I'm the only one in my friend circle that did get pregnant early on.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that you mentioned that, you know, I want to touch upon. I know it won't happen today, but that dynamic of dating while being a single mom.
Ooh,
And
yes.
child, I mean, that's a conversation in itself.
Wow.
That's something else. Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation. And you had a daughter.
It,
I had
or
a son who had some real like.
Oh, and then that's a man coming into his life. Oh yes, please have this discussion as well. We're gonna need to have this because
we're gonna need to have that one.
Hey,
Yes,
hey, and Vangie, I
too.
was there while she was dating some of them. Trust, I saw all like this. What's gonna happen this weekend? Who gonna get shot at? Who gonna get in a high-speed chase? Why y'all shooting at me? I didn't. We had all of it. We did in Southeast San Diego. Oh God, we did it. Yes,
and that's
did.
what I'm saying. I had a son who was also very vocal. So there were a couple times where, you know, he 8 or 9 years old standing in front of me like, you looking at my mama? Like he was about it. Like, so we're gonna have to talk about that one because there is some definite.
Yes, absolutely. Let's yes.
You know, being a single woman, you have a child and
child
then that
already.
process. Yes. That's something. And then also that parenting aspect, and you spoke about it a little bit as far as that difference of like parenting as you're young and a teenager, and then maybe there's some gap in years, and then you have, you know, more kids and what the difference in that parenting and what it looks like. I think that's a very real conversation that we really need to, you know, spend some time on. But, you know, as we prepare to kind of close out the hour here, I just want to go back to like, you know, what, you know, thoughts or, you know, tips or words of encouragement that you could give to those that are young in parenting. And like you mentioned, now being a grandparent, because I'm also a grandparent, and sort of grandparenting those young adults or teenagers with kids.
Yes. I just say, believe in yourself. Do not think that being pregnant young is an end all or be all, because it's not. It doesn't stop your life in any way. You limit yourself. You stop yourself. It's all up to you. It's your decision, but it can be done. It can be done successfully. You know, both of my children have gone to, my son just started college. My daughter finished culinary school. So they're successful adults. And I did that.
Yeah, you
did.
Right.
Right.
And so if I'm proud of anything, it is definitely my family, what I did. Like I take pride in my family. I did that. Right. And I wanted my children to have a different experience than me, and they were able to, and I did that. I thought of that, and I made sure it happened.
Right. Gotcha. Well, I know I was talking to family here recently, just yesterday, matter of fact, and I was talking to my sister, and you know, my mom always told us, don't have kids unless you can spoil them. So even as a teen parent, I mean, yeah, all my kids are rotten. They're rotten. You know, right. I acknowledge that. I know I have created some monsters. God bless, you know, whoever, you know, marries them. Y'all got some shoes to fill. But I acknowledge it, you know, but that was what my mother instilled in me. Like, you know, you have a child, regardless of, you know, the challenges or whatever's going on, you must, you know, love on them, pour into them. And I think that's a very important piece. And pouring into them doesn't mean putting every designer label on them. That was something that I saw, you know, being a young mom, that was the thing, like designer this, and that. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, you ain't hugged them, you ain't kissed them. You haven't engaged them in no sports, no activities. Like
there it is.
No,
there it is. Yeah,
their hair is combed, you know, once every week. Meanwhile, you fresh to death every day. Like, I mean, that was the thing, like, put designer labels on your kids and, things of that nature. And I'm not gonna front, my oldest son especially was fresh to death all the time, but there were all these other things that I made sure he had, so I think there's something to be said about that piece in the parenting as well. That is so much more than food, clothes, and shelter.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Well said. And I think so. So Keisha, as you move forward in your counseling career, what's your emphasis as far as area that you want to work with? Is it going to be adults? Do you see yourself working with kids? Like, where do you feel like you're going to land based on your own life experiences?
I think in the middle. I like it all. I think teenagers and moving into to adulthood. I have a couple of teenage clients right now, and I'm really enjoying what we're doing, the work we're doing together. So I definitely want to make a difference in young people's lives, and definitely want to role model by example. That's what my life purpose is.
In a counseling session right now, of course, say you had a young teenage mother, but you had the opportunity to do a family session. How would you prepare the parents, for what's coming? How would you encourage them to support the daughter? And hopefully if the father could be there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, I think parents just don't know. I just, that's really just it. I think they're afraid, just like we are, and just don't know how. But I think
what would you say? So what would you say to the parents
of someone?
So how would you tool the parents of the child having a baby? How would you tool them in a session? What kind of things would you be kind of hoping that they would leave when they're done seeing you?
Just letting them know that they didn't do anything wrong. I think if they think it's a reflection on them. It's not a reflection on them. It's not, sometimes you don't know your children have things going on. You know what I mean? So it's not a reflection on them, that they have done what they needed to do, and just help to support her and give her what she needs to make it to where she's going. Continue to support her how they have. If they've supported her all this time, don't change that. Don't change the way you feel.
So to add to that, I think it's very important, especially during this time, the pandemic and all the stuff going on, that adults get so concerned with adult issues that they lose touch of what's going on with their kids. That's something that I am very, keen on, and, stay very vigilant and observant about what's going on with my kids. And I always tell my kids that, and I think they believe that I have, I'm part, mom and part Miss Cleo a little bit, because I tell them, I already know what's going on or what you do. It doesn't matter when you want to tell me, so really keeping those lines of communication and not getting so caught up with adult issues and challenges that you lose sight of what, your kids are going through. Like when my oldest son told me he was going to have a baby, and he was trying to muster up, the courage to tell me, I was like, so what? She's pregnant? Mom, how did you know? I tried to tell him, I know everything. I know everything.
Yeah.
So, this was a really great conversation. And like we were talking a few moments ago, I definitely think there are a few, follow-up conversations, that need to be had that sort of stem from, having having kids at a very young age, how that overall experience sort of shapes you as an adult. Like we mentioned, the dating piece, that second set of kids you have sort of after that gap and after some experiences, the parenting practices that you employed early on began to look very different, as you get older. So, I think, we scratched the surface a little bit and had some very real conversations, and sounds like we all had, some different experiences as far as, being young parents. But I think it's important for people to know that despite those differences in experiences, here we are, we are, I
love it.
We are all, thriving and surviving.
Here we are.
In our careers and personally. So I want to thank you both for, taking time to be with us this morning, and Mrs. Lester, we appreciate you. We thank you. I'm all for folks from the community taking time to recycle their education and experience and not taking their degrees, their financial attainment and going off to the hills and never reaching back. So I appreciate that.
Mrs. Lester, I know we're going to get out of here, but can you please tell us how people can find you if they're interested in getting counseling with you? I know you're on Psychology Today, right?
I am on Psychology Today, LaKisha Lester. You can find me there.
Okay. Well, I encourage everybody to keep your faith strong, and that definitely will facilitate keeping your mind right. We'll check in with you next week.
Thank you all for watching.
Thank you.